You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Everyone who owns or operates a diesel engine has likely heard of diesel exhaust fluid, or those acronyms DEF. Yet, not everyone is fully aware of exactly what that is, or what it does, or are there any differences in the quality of products you use, or really how it all fits into an existing operation. Fortunately for you, we're about to get the answers to these topics and more. Welcome to Convenience Matters. I'm Donovan Woods of the Fuels Institute and NACS, and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Carolyn Schnare with NACS also. And today we're talking with Jay Gagnon, who is the Senior Product Manager of Old World Industries. And like Donovan said up front, we're going to talk about vehicles and fueling, and specifically diesel and fuel additives, well, that frankly make diesel cars and trucks function. Welcome, Jay.
Hey, thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Donovan. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you today.
Well, Jay,
Absolutely.
So I don't drive a diesel car, and I don't know a whole lot about cars in general, except what I've been learning on my show here. So if you wouldn't mind, can you give us a little background on what makes diesel engines different than those that run on regular gasoline?
Diesel is what we call it is a direct injection technology. It is a detonation technology, whereas a gasoline engine is spark fired. The diesel engine, the combustion process is initiated by pressure and temperature, which makes the diesel platform inherently more efficient than a comparable gasoline engine of the same size.
Gotcha. And thank you for that. That makes sure all of our audience is on the same page before we dive a little bit deeper, specifically into the intro comments about that diesel exhaust fluid, or DEF. So, Jay, what exactly is DEF, or diesel exhaust fluid?
Well, DEF is a very simple compound. It's a combination of medical grade high purity urea and deionized water. It is necessary for almost every diesel engine manufactured post-2006 because it helps engine manufacturers achieve stringent fuel emission standards put in place by the EPA back in 2010.
Got it. So to help everyone breathe better, make sure that that negative connotation that people may have had, I'm in my 40s, so maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago, when you thought of diesel engines, you thought of that black smoke coming out of the back of a truck, and that's all been regulated where you don't see that. It's not this dirty technology that people default into thinking of. But now, is this a technology that's strictly for light duty, or just for heavy duty, or medium? Like, where does it actually fit when it comes to the class of vehicle?
Actually, any diesel vehicle with a selective catalytic reduction system, and the industry has pretty much adapted SCR as the go-to technology for meeting these stringent standards since 2006. Practically every new light or heavy-duty diesel vehicle manufactured today has an SCR system, and it requires DEF.
Got it. That helps a lot.
Can you explain SCR, what that stands for?
Sure.
I'm playing the, I don't want to say I'm playing the one that doesn't know a lot about cars, but
Well,
I play one on TV.
Just as I'm sure everybody's affiliated or understands how technology has improved in their regular gasoline vehicle, the same thing has been going on with the diesel truck category. It driven to increase efficiency, to increase power, to increase fuel economy, to meet stricter and stricter pollution laws. SCR is just one of many technologies that diesel engine manufacturers have adapted in order to clean the exhaust stream and make the air coming out of the tailpipe as clean as can be. And many years ago, engine manufacturers, and let me pause and say that the government did not mandate that manufacturers use SCR or have to use DEF. Engine manufacturers latched onto SCR technology as being the best technology to both maximize engine power, reduce emissions, than many of the other technologies that are available to them.
Got it. So that gives us a little bit of background, specifically as it relates to why DEF is necessary. The EPA back in 2010, different regulations that are coming down, and what is DEF the primary solution to this issue in terms of what the EPA came down in terms of regulations? Does DEF the number one thing that people can do to make sure that they meet those regulations?
Well, actually, consumers with new diesel engines don't really have a choice. A vehicle will not run if it runs out of DEF. It will either, when the level gets too low, it will, what we call derate, means the engine power will start to choke off. Dash lights can come on to warn the consumer that their DEF supply is getting low. And if you run out of DEF, then the vehicle's are actually programmed to shut down and not operate. Again, so this is a checks and balances so that people don't try to avoid adding the required fluid and bypassing emission standards. But there's a whole alphabet soup of technologies that engine manufacturers use now and have used. There's diesel particulate filter, your comment earlier about soot and black smoke. That is one technology that is standard across all these vehicles to trap that soot. There are diesel oxidation catalysts. There's the SCR system. There's EGR, exhaust gas recirculation, and some vehicles actually have an ammonia oxidation catalyst as the last stage. But all of the engine manufacturers have settled on SCR technology, which requires diesel exhaust fluid as being the best technology for reducing nitrous oxide emissions, which is part of all the different pollutants that are processed through the exhaust system.
Got it. You know, Jay, as I was preparing for this particular podcast, and we talked to you a couple of weeks ago just to get ready for this, it's one of those things happened to me is when you buy a new car or when you're thinking about buying a new car, all of a sudden you see that car everywhere you go. And once we started talking about this, everywhere I went, when I saw a heavy duty truck in particular, I would see either a sticker or something on their trucks that talked about DEF. And it just rung a bell that this is out there. This is widespread. And as you mentioned, as we talked about earlier, everyone who has a diesel engine, if they're not aware of this, they will be aware of it because your car will make you aware of it. But more so for those heavy duty, medium duty, they are aware of it. And it's a thing they have to make it run. So again, if you're listening to this particular podcast, just start looking around. If you start seeing trucks and things around you, you'll see this everywhere you go. It's definitely out there.
Now, a great clue when you pass a Class 8, a big rig truck on the highway, to determine if they absolutely have an SCR system, just look for the presence of the vertical exhaust stacks. Chances are, if they don't have the vertical exhaust stacks, that means that vehicle is equipped with an SCR system. And part of that is the packaging requirements to put all these different catalysts into the exhaust cause many manufacturers for a number of years to eliminate the exhaust stacks that you would typically see. The industry affectionately calls them grass burners because the exhaust points down underneath the truck.
So talking about lighter duty vehicles, and that's like for the ones that generally visit the convenience stores and gas stations, retailers, I maybe know about DEF, but maybe they don't. So, I mean, there's a chance that someone like Donovan said that just got their car and maybe didn't know that they needed to put this in, or just forgot or something like that, and they need to grab some DEF. Is this something that you can find mostly at retailer stores? And is there are there different types out there that they should look towards stocking, or things that they should know about helping that customer when they're standing there scratching their head at the pump trying to figure out why the car won't work?
Well, when the consumer fills up with diesel fluid, normally most vehicles these days will have a second blue cap right next to the diesel fill port. Blue is a universal industry adopted color for the DEF fill tank. So right there, they will see something is different about their vehicle. Some vehicles actually have a gauge on the dash that says how much DEF is in the vehicle. In terms of where can you find DEF, because it has been in the marketplace since before 2010, and because all new diesel vehicles these days require it, DEF is readily available. And one of the key reasons Blue DEF, the brand that Old Old World produces, who I work for, is so popular is because we produce a very high quality product, and the majority of retailers recognize that. And so almost without exception, if you go into an auto parts store, you will see Blue Death. You may see another private brand of Death, but you would definitely see Blue Death. If you go into any of the big hardware chains, and I won't give a plug to the different hardware chains because that's not what I'm here to do, but you will also find, without exception, that they have Blue Death, and they may, and many of them don't, have any other brands available. That's the high reputation we have. And so Death is readily available to consumers. Even in the C-store, the 7-Elevens and these other types of places that you represent, Death is typically readily available.
So that actually gave me an idea, and maybe I'm just slow to the game here, but I know when at the pump, we talked with retailers, we talk with beverage companies, we talk with retailers who are doing different kind of promotions at store, that this is a perfect thing for retailers to offer, whether it's like a coupon that prints out after they fill up, like, hey, do you remember your DEF today, or something like that, especially from the diesel nozzle side of the pump or something, or even on those screens that they have there, because this is such a perfect opportunity to what we would call bundling in like the food service side of things. It's bundling from the gas side of things. So that just came to me. And I think, have you seen retailers out there that do things like that?
There are some that do that, and some do promotions. Well, they'll give you a reduced price if you buy two at the same time. You know, the typical 1/2 to 3/4 1-ton truck carries anywhere from 5 to 8 or 10 gallons of DEF in the tank size. And DEF is consumed at roughly, give or take, about 3% of diesel. So it lasts a lot longer. It doesn't have to be refilled as frequently as diesel fluid. But when you get low, and there is a risk of your vehicle derating, losing power, or shutting down, consumers are rightly worried about that, and it's best not to delay topping off or refilling your DEF tank if you think you're close to that level. So,
Jay, are there, like you mentioned, you're with Blue Death, so obviously you're going to tell me that's great, that's the best one. But are there, but much like branded gasoline and they add additives, if you're a certain major oil brand, you might add a certain additive to your types of fuel, or and then unbranded, whatever. Is there a difference in that quality of DEF?
Well, DEF is very, very regulated. ISO, which is the International Standards Organization, has very strict guidelines and standards of what can and cannot be in diesel exhaust fluid. Further, all high-quality brands of DEF will typically have a small black square printed on the box from the American Petroleum Institute. So you can't put DEF on the market if you don't meet the ISO standard. All high-quality brands have API standards. Blue Death has a very long-term reputation for quality, not only at the point of manufacture, but throughout distribution, because, quite frankly, DEF is very easy to contaminate. It does not take much. In fact, 1 teaspoon of salt could contaminate 5,000 gallons of diesel exhaust fluid, so the standards have to be very, very high. Wow. Blue Death has a great reputation for that, and so there are never, I think the days of buying bad DEF in the extreme case are gone, but there are definitely quality advantages to different brands of DEF. So you should always look for a reputable brand when you need to purchase DEF.
So Jay, a lot of times when it comes to anything consumer related, we want to know where we can go for help. We want to know where we can go to understand more. You mentioned API, but as far as it relates to your organization, do you provide education for consumers? I'm speaking specifically of consumers just because the heavy duty side may be regulated in terms of corporate. They may take care of these things. But if you're a consumer or you're trying to become educated on this, what types of tools do you offer that you can help someone understand why, where to go, and why your product, maybe in your case, why it's the best choice for someone to purchase? Where can they find information like that?
Sure. The consumer could always go to bluedef.com, and we have our parent corporate sites, peak.com, for information. We have toll-free numbers on all our packaging and everything and on our website, so they can call and talk to a person if they have any questions at all. All the retail partners that carry our product are very well versed into the quality and details, so they could speak to a local retailer if they had any immediate questions or wanted answers to. But, I didn't completely answer your question earlier about what differentiates one brand of DEF from another. And so I just wanted to add that even though DEF is very highly regulated and there are quality differences in terms of materials and manufacturing processes, Blue DEF and Old World is a very innovative company, and we're very proud to announce that. Coming late July, early August, we are going to be introducing a brand new premium version of DEF called Blue DEF Platinum. And Blue DEF Platinum is not just another DEF. It actually has a mix of proprietary ingredients that make it a better DEF and can eliminate product problems consumers might see with the diesel exhaust fluid that they use now.
You know what? You made me think of something, Jay, as you were talking about what you're now offering. Now, I want to ask a question that in terms of the market out there. You mentioned that the regulations are very strict now, and you never know what happens at the end of this year with an election cycle, what kind of regulations or what kind of regulating body we might be with. But that said, do you anticipate any changes in regulation, any increased, I know cafe standards come and go, month to month these days, it seems like. But in terms of what's allowed in terms of diesel engines or in terms of car manufacturing going forward, and it doesn't have to be in the next year, it could be years down the road. But in terms of vehicle technologies and what you offer, what do you see in the future for DEF vehicles, all that 5 years in the future, however far away you want to answer that?
Well, the industry saves millions of dollars if they can increase fuel economy by fractions of a mile per gallon. The government is always interested in improving environmental effects for the general public, so I don't see a decrease in fuel economy standards or a decrease in the emission standards. There's been talk earlier this year on what type of technologies could be used to make these things even better in the future. And one technology that's being evaluated is offering a secondary SCR system. And one of my lead statements was technology in gasoline automobiles has progressed over the years. In order to help automobiles achieve tighter emission standards, there have been changes to the systems bringing catalysts closer to the exhaust and closer to the motor, because heat is what makes these catalysts effective. Now, that hasn't caught up to the diesel industry next, but that is, I think, where it is going. You will see a secondary catalyst up closer to the engine so that the system can light off earlier, get warmer earlier, and start being effective earlier, which means that you're going to see an even greater reduction in NOx and particulates and all that. And that additional system is going to require more DEF. So for the retailer in the market now, if they're on the fence of whether they should offer DEF in their planogram or how much DEF they should offer, DEF is not going to go away, and usage is more likely than ever to go up, regardless of the efficiencies that they build into the systems. And when consumers need DEF, they need DEF. So our research has shown that the two overriding priorities for consumers when they need DEF are brand and convenience. When a consumer needs DEF, they aren't price shopping. They come into your convenience store, they have a low DEF light, or they're starting to get a warning light or something's going on. They're not going to check your shelf for price and then go, let me go down the block. They are going to buy at your location at that time. So you don't need to be as competitively mapped. You don't have to keep an eye on what the guy down the corner is pricing at in order to be successful and profitable selling DEF.
Well, Jay, that's right there, the takeaway. You said brand and convenience, which are two of my favorite things to talk about on this show. And I think there's some brands that are just more than the brand. And I think like if you grew up in the South, like I did down in Florida, a Coke means a soda, but it's also a brand name. But, you ask what kind of soda? And then there's Kleenex, which is something that's, ubiquitous with the word tissue, and probably gets even used more than that. And I've heard retailers and consumers even say like, oh yeah, I need Blue Def. And they just say it rolls off the tongue like it's the kind of Def out there. So you've achieved that Coke Kleenex status, at least in this world, I think. So that's awesome. I think that's probably something to pat yourselves on the back for, but another reason why we wanted you to talk more about this on the show. So I guess you did tell us a little bit about where they can find. Where can listeners find more about you personally? Are you on LinkedIn? Can we look you up? Can we email you?
Yeah, yes, I'm on LinkedIn, and I can be reached at Old World at jgagnon@owi.com if they would like to reach out to me directly.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Well, Jay, thank you so much. I know Donovan, you guys have done some work with quality of fuel and everything through the Fuels Institute. You work really closely on that. Is there anything that listeners might want to check out to learn a little bit about that kind of stuff?
Sure. And again, thank you, Jay, for being a part of this episode. And if you did have more questions regarding diesel fuel quality, the Fuels Institute, if you go to fuelsinstitute.org, you can also look under a tab for diesel fuel quality, and it's a new council that we have where that's what we talk about. We make sure that, as Jay mentioned earlier in the episode, any little bit of dirt, particle, anything that gets into the stream there could definitely damage not only your systems, your tanks, but also the consumer, give them a bad experience, if not permanent bad experience. So it's something that the industry is fully aware of, and they're working together, whether it's the automakers, whether it's the additive companies, or whether the actual retailers themselves, making sure they know where there's any disturbance in that transfer of the product to the consumer or the customer. And diesel fuel quality is definitely a major issue. As you look at diesel fuel is the number one thing when it comes to transporting the majority of goods throughout this country. So it's here to stay. I know we talk a lot about different types of transportation energy, but diesel, as it relates to consumer products and goods, it is definitely here to stay for a long time. And again, Jay, we appreciate you being on the podcast, and we thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.